we don't know what's going to happen. We really can't, but it's an interesting thing is like, if you don't do anything at all because you're afraid, that's just as bad. Like you're going to
Yeah,
lose money by not doing anything at all.
sure.
And so it's like you have to find a thing. And no matter what, like unless you're already wealthy, you've got to have an active income and you've got to work towards passive income.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like that's it. And your active income might be being a doctor or doing land deals
Right.
or a construction business or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. You need something that's going to keep the lights on and food on the table if the rest of it goes away for a while. Like you have to be able to weather those storms.
Welcome back to the Cashflow Fight Club Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Dr. Jason Balara with us, a board certified veterinary surgeon, real estate syndicator, and CEO of Lark Capital Group. He's also the host of the Know Your Why podcast. Jason's story is one of creativity and resilience, balancing a successful medical career while building wealth through multifamily real estate and small businesses.
We'll explore how Jason leveraged his construction background, navigated challenges, and found financial freedom, all while creating a passive income through his ventures. And if you're ready to learn about the best kept secret in real estate investing, land flipping, check out our Flipping Dirt coaching program. It's the easiest and most reliable way to generate cash flow and amplify your wealth building.
Let's jump into the arena with Dr. Jason Balara. Jason, thanks so much for joining us on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. We're excited to reconnect and kind of hear what's going on with you.
Yes, welcome, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super excited to talk with you both, Mike and Ligia. I'm honored to be here. And like I said before we started recording, I love the name of your podcast. So
We love it
like
too.
Well, yeah, me
references
too.
all
I mean,
around.
when we thought about starting a podcast, there's a lot of them out there, and we kind of wanted to do something fun and unique. And yeah, this definitely kind of is a fun theme to play with
Yeah,
and stuff. So
sure.
yeah, we like it as well. But thank you for that. Well, it's been a minute since we've connected, and audience probably may or may not be familiar with you. But why don't you give us a bit about your background and just get us started with that?
Yeah, I'm, in a nutshell, I've almost maybe that I have a dual career path, I would say. And so I am a veterinary surgeon, which is sort of, I think, unique in that I am also a real estate investor and don't see a lot of that. I certainly don't see a lot of real estate investors in the veterinary field. And I don't think I've seen any other veterinarians in the real estate field, at least not at, sort of commercial levels. But, so a lot of people know me from one side or the other, but I've been a veterinarian. I graduated in 2004. I've been a veterinary surgeon exclusively since 2008. But I started in real estate and construction as a teenager. It was
Mm.
always something that I saw as, I guess, a way out from, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so that idea of ownership, we moved a lot, we lived in different apartments, that kind of thing. But the idea of ownership and that real estate could provide some level of freedom from, how I grew up. And then also, so because of that, I decided I wanted to buy a house fairly young and didn't have the money to buy a house. And so that meant figuring out how to fix things. And so it all ties in where I found, construction and real estate and used that. I leveraged those things realistically throughout college and vet school and beyond to whether it was, sort of pay living expenses during school or whatever, different ways. And then I got a little bit away from it for a while, focused on my surgery career. But then back in 2000, I decided I wanted to get more seriously into real estate. And that's when I came upon commercial real estate and syndication and have been doing that since 2020 with my company, Lark Capital. A lot has transpired over those 4 going on 5 years for sure. But it's always my background in, I think, in construction has really led me in sort of the direction that I've really ended up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to kind of pull on that thread a little bit with you because I share construction-ish background. Were you residential construction or commercial or?
Mostly residential. I worked for a couple of different GCs over time. I also worked for an electrician for a number of years. And with the electrician, we actually did a fair bit of commercial work, but
Mhm.
most of it was residential, and a lot of it was either on my own sort of like live and flip situations or friends' houses. But ultimately, it was always something there that was there and more or less in the background at times. But it was always a part of my life. And my wife knows we don't buy houses that are already fixed. It's like when we move, if we buy a new house, it's like we're gonna probably strip this down to the studs and make it our own and all of that. So it's kind of been a part of me that never really went away.
Interesting. Yeah, my dad was a GC when I was a teenager. When I was a young boy, my parents were like the original flippers. We moved houses about every year. They would buy an old home, just like you were talking about, strip it down, put in hardwood floors, all new flooring, do all that kind of stuff. And then my dad kind of graduated into being a GC when suburban building was taking off in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and got into that when the in the heyday of things. I was probably a young teen, and so my roles were working. Like, I started out doing yards, and then I was doing home trash outs, and then I would work with the subs a little bit, doing some framing and foundation work and roofing, and never really got into the skilled trades like electrical or plumbing. But I never caught that bug. Like, I think I saw my dad struggle as an entrepreneur. Like, in the '80s, things were hot, and he was just pumping out
Yeah.
homes like nobody's business. But then I think that the savings and loan crisis hit, and lending got really tough, and big box home builders became prominent. And so he also didn't like to build a low end home. He liked woodwork and beautiful finishing touches and all this kind of stuff. And so he had a premium price point, but he wasn't necessarily a luxury builder. And so, he just didn't find a footing. And I think all of that pushed me into, I went similar to you. I went to university, I went pre-med. I had thoughts of, a career and a salary and what was a high paying job that I could get. And I didn't get that taste of cash flow from real estate like it sounds like you did. Like, house hacking or even flipping, and you get that little injection of either rental income or somebody helping pay your mortgage or a big lump if you flip and sell something. Is that kind of what gave you that taste and carried
Yeah.
forward?
It was, I mean, and like I said, I would say admittedly, a lot of it was just escaping, the scenario that I grew up in. But the reality was, but yeah, you start to realize the power of it. And it was like, so I bought that first house please, like, I hope no one thinks that I am smart about my timing of the market, but I bought my first house in 2000 and it, so we know about the housing crash in 2008, but what a lot of people don't talk about is the run up in values of on the residential side leading up to that. And so my first house I bought for $99,000. I don't think I had to put anything down. It eventually appraised for 250,000 in the 5 years that I owned it. I paid off student loans. I used that house to do a whole lot of things by refinancing and stuff. It was a similar, unfortunately, similar thing that we experienced recently. Like, rates
Exactly.
were low. They would give anyone a loan. Like, I had no business, like, I had a job, but I had no business really getting a mortgage based on what I had at that point. But I did what I think is always a smart strategy, and we now call it value add, right? Like, but I fixed that house up. I renovated it. I
Yeah.
added a very
You
large,
add
uh,
value. Yeah.
right. You can like if you're not reliant on the market, you can make money in real estate anywhere, like any time of it. You just have to know how to inject that value, and I think that's where the miss sometimes comes is people think that it's, they see a hot market and like, I'm just going to make money because everybody's making money. But what you're missing is like, yes, everybody's making money, but some people are making more money. And
Yeah.
that's because they also know how to create value within those times. And it's like, now we have names like the Burr strategy and house hacking and all of that stuff. House hacking is roommates. Like, I couldn't afford the mortgage without having roommates. So I did that. Like, it was just, I did it, a lot of it out of necessity. It didn't have names then. None of it was, but it was like, you figure those things out. And so, you know, when I realized I could own a house and was making more money from roommates than I was paying in mortgage, I was like, yeah,
It was a light
everyone
bulb
should
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
yeah, kind of like, it's a really good way to start into real estate when you're, if you're stuck just thinking, I want to do that, but I don't have much, like house hacking, roommates, whatever you want to call it. Like it's a really good strategy to start. And then Burr is like similar thing. You're adding value to your house, whether you live there or someone else, it's a house you don't live in. But the idea is to be able to inject value somehow. That's really to me, the main, if there's one strategy that works in all real estate, it's sort of value add, injection of something that wasn't there when you bought it.
I really like what you say about out of necessity, creativity really starts flowing because many times, if I kind of observe a little bit the young generation, and I'm not talking about everybody, and I'm not generalizing, but a lot of the kids are brought up, they're pampered, they go to college, parents pay for everything, they pay for the rent, they pay for everything. And there's not that necessity and that urgency in young people to be creative and do something, have roommates that pay for your, help pay for rent and even buy a house and do all that. But I really like that. And it really, I remind myself all the time that out of necessity and out of crisis, many times really creative and great ideas come out of.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's been the heart of probably anything really good that I've achieved, is just like, I've like, do this or else, like, I got to figure it out. Like, I
Yes.
think that's, and I agree with you. That those generational differences, I think, are real. And like being a parent is probably the hardest job I've ever had. But one of the things I really think about a lot is like, how do I instill work ethic and drive and that sort of willingness to sacrifice for the long-term outcome in my kids when I also want to provide them with everything
Yes.
that I didn't necessarily have. And it's like, that's a big piece that like I struggle with internally. Like everything you do with them is like, should I do that for them? Should I make them, that kind of thing. And they're still really young. And I feel like I'm learning all the time about it, but it's what you just spoke of is a very, I guess, a thought that's front of mind for me in almost everything I do.
Yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
to hang out there just a little bit because Lygia, as you were kind of narrating that little bit of a story, I found myself thinking that some people don't find the creativity out of that necessity, right? Some people
Very true.
go the other way and just
Yeah.
shrink or whatever. And I guess it sounds like, Jason, you have in you a desire, right? A desire to find a solution or to make things better or to do things. Maybe rewinding into your childhood a little bit. I mean, it sounds like you mentioned, you didn't have a wealthy childhood or whatever, but did your
Right.
parents actively work to instill certain character traits or values in that way? Or do you think it's something that, nature nurture type thing that you just
Yeah,
inherently had a little bit?
that's a good one. So I was raised by a single mother, two kids. My mom worked hard, but I would say she didn't always make like the smartest decisions
Mhm.
from a money standpoint. Cause my mom is a dreamer. She's still a dreamer. Like I love it, but I like, sometimes I just want to be like, you're probably not going to win the lottery. Like that's probably not a good retirement strategy.
Strategy. Yeah.
But you might, but I wouldn't count on that being the retirement strategy. And it's kind of like, so, that gives you a sense. Like my mom was always a dreamer, and I think instilled in me that things could be better and would be better. And I saw her work hard. I also had an uncle who, I don't know, I guess you'd rescue me. I don't really, I hesitate to talk about this some stuff sometimes because some people want to think that I had a bad childhood, and I don't think that at all. Like
Yeah.
I think like if your kids are loved, which I was, it doesn't matter. Like the rest of it doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter like the rest of it. And so I have no like ill will about the way I
Sure.
grew up or anything like that. It's just I saw things that I didn't want them to be that way for me forever. And so I adjusted to that. But my uncle is like, he is that work ethic guy.
Mhm.
And again, like all of these different personalities can sometimes be detrimental to yourself. Like my mom, the dreamer, like being a dreamer is awesome, but like not not always recognizing that there's some like choices that have to go along with that to execute those
Sure.
dreams. And like my uncle was like, he is an incredibly hard worker, but sometimes I think you get in that mode, work, DIY, and can't get out of your own way. And that's been me. Like that's been me that's been one of the things I struggled with, especially when I got, more into entrepreneurship was like, thought I could do it all, but I can't actually do it all. Like, there's not enough time in the day for me to do everything that I want to accomplish. And so it's like you have to find that balance and you have to find the team to help you execute on those dreams. Like
Mhm.
that to me, it's like both of those, I would say they're probably personality extremes, but both of them have really, really good like upside, but also some like really strong downside. And it's like trying to walk that line, which is effectively impossible. Probably just swing back and forth. But it's like that's to me, you've got to people say work smarter, not harder. I don't think it's a choice. You have to do both.
Yeah.
You actually have to work smart and hard if you want to achieve big things. Like that to me, that's getting real philosophical here. So I'm
No,
sorry.
this is great. I love this topic, and I want to go deeper. Honestly, just so I mean, it sounds like you had some, and so like it or not, our parents and our early surroundings imprint on us, right? They imprint certain things. Your mom's a
Yeah.
dreamer. Your uncle was a hard worker. Same as all of us. Yet some of us find clarity out of that, right? It sounds like you, and I don't know if this is the case as a teenager or somebody in your early 20s, but at least now reflecting back, you have an awareness and a clarity and an ability to talk about it in terms of your own desires and path. But
Mhm.
some people and some of us in those younger years, don't have the awareness to see that, and we just go down that path, right? Like
Right.
because it's imprinted. And much as we all hate the saying you're going to turn out like your parents, but we end up in a sense turn out like our parents in
We
many
all felt like
ways.
it's in one way or another, part of you is like your parents, whether you like it or
Yeah,
not. Well, that's
yeah. And
that's
so
part of
did
you.
you have other role models, or be them real people, or Robert Kiyosaki book, or whatever? Did you have other things that kind of, even I personally, university gets starting to get a bad rap these days, and certainly the value equation is different there, but I
Yeah.
found an intellectual awakening of sorts through my university career that just broadened. Now I already had a little bit of that predisposition. I really loved learning and exploring, and I had a curious
Wow.
mind and stuff. But it sounds like you, or I guess let me ask you, did you at those early stages kind of still have this clarity about, oh, I like this aspect of mom, and I definitely want to hang on to that? Or, well, gosh, I like also my uncle's drive and success, but I surely don't want to be a workaholic? Or was
Yeah.
that something that evolved as you
I think that's
seasoned?
definitely yeah, that was an evolution. I don't believe that I've recognized those things at the time. Like I've been really lucky to have had some great mentors and like I would say like I didn't know it at the time. My mom taught us kindness. My mom taught us to be good to people. Like that was it. Like and I that so like first lessons I guess I would attribute to that. She taught us to be good to people and so I always approached dealing with people that way. And so it allowed me to get, and it like, again, I'm 100% sure I didn't recognize any of this at the time, but like it allowed me to get along with people. And so I couple like a work ethic with being someone that people can get along with can actually go pretty far with that. Like there's
Yeah.
a lot that I would say like came strictly just from that. And like, but I also had with that was able to stumble along, a lot of really great mentors that were, some of the contractors I worked for. Just like one of them was I that first house that I bought, I needed some work done. I don't honestly don't remember how I found him, but I was gonna hire him to do something and I couldn't hire him to do everything that needed to be done, so I was there working, trying to figure stuff out, and he's watching me and he's like, "Hey, you might wanna try this," and, like but he saw my work ethic, and he was like, "You ever wanna come have a job, like, let me know." And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I wanna learn." I'm also very willing to work for pay. I mean, I got paid by him, but, like, I am very willing to sacrifice something to gain an additional skill and sort of always have been. And so that was one of the things I worked for. The electrician I worked for was a guy my mom dated for a while. Like that's how I met him. He was a nice guy. We got along. Like he's like, if you want to make some money, I can use you like here. Like, so I learned how to wire a house. I like, and all of that stuff went along. I had great coaches. Like, and it's funny what you don't recognize. I look for the good in people. And so like if I rewind all that stuff, they weren't all perfect people, but like none of us are. And so it was just something that like I just worked hard and I liked getting along with people. And like that got me pretty far. I like coaches in high school, my track coach in college, like my track coach in college, again, didn't realize it at the time, but oh, we got these shoes that Nike wants us to trial. I thought you'd be good for them. I was
Uh,
like, no one else ever got those. He just knew I didn't have money and had
yeah,
worn shoes and like made that happen. Like I don't, it's just like things that I didn't know were happening at the time. I can look back now and be like, that guy probably got me through college. He's probably the reason I graduated from college because the first year I was like, I don't like this. I should just go work. And it was probably because of my track coach that I continue. Like you can just think back to people in your life
yeah,
and the influence that they had. And I mean, it continues to this day. Like I have mentors now in the real estate space. It's just, I just hope that I can also be that to other
mm,
people. Like that's really, I try to give it back wherever I can.
I also think that the kindness attracts kindness. And I don't know how, whenever you were aware, but you mentioned that your mom taught you kindness. You grew up in that environment where you were a kind person. And I really think that many times we're not aware that what we put out attracts what we receive. And
Yeah.
many times that is such an important thing to be aware of.
Are you
Yeah.
familiar with Deepak Chopra? I would imagine, or
The name, yes, but to be honest, not like the
he's an
well,
endocrinologist, but he's more of a spiritual guru
yeah.
of sorts. I mean, I don't know exactly what his religion, if he professes to have one, he may not. But we went to a seminar one weekend, and he was hosting actually, and he has something I think he calls his 7 laws of spiritual success or something. But one of them is the law of good intentions, and you mentioned that a minute ago. Like I also ascribe to believing the best in people, right? And you're going to get burned because there are some people who are
Yep.
looking to
Yeah.
get by. But in general, if you have this mindset of people behave with good intentions, right? They're not coming at you in a certain way. More often than not, that will serve you better. I loved that phrase that you mentioned there.
Yeah. It's funny because in the construction world, same thing being a surgeon, like there are some I would say some people in real estate business industry too, but like the surgeon's a really good example because there is a perception
Mhm.
that surgeons can be jerks. And the perception is probably in some ways reality for in a lot of instances. Like it's just in those like high stress, high driven fields, I think sometimes that is the mask that people put on because they think that's how they have to be to have success. And it's just never been me. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been told by technicians or whoever in the field, like, you're gonna need to yell more if you want to get what you want to get. And I'm like, I'm not, I don't need to. I've gotten this far
Yeah.
without being that person. I'm not going to be that person and I'll be fine. Like don't worry. I don't need to be the angry guy in the room. Like that's not how I want to get where I want. And I think like people, I didn't think that was a thing. Like I didn't think that was an okay way to be in business or maybe even surgery and stuff. I just thought that's me and I'll be an outsider, but I'm not going to change that part of myself. And I think one of the best parts about like social media is like you see someone like Gary Vaynerchuk talking about this all the time. Like you don't have to be a jerk to have success and like leading with kindness and all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, he's pretty successful. Maybe it is okay. Like I just, for most of my life, I was like, this is just me and I'll be this way. And maybe that means I can't be successful in the way that mean people are. I don't know, but it's just like you start to see maybe that's a shift. I don't know, but it's cool to see that like people actually believe that you can lead and have success and grow a company, whatever thing you're trying to achieve, still, showing kindness to the people around you. So it's a neat, to me, a neat change, but maybe it's always been there and I just didn't recognize it.
And you don't have to be a shark, as at
Right.
least I grew up with. I grew up with that, saying that you are a successful businessman only if you're a shark, if you know how to be a shark.
I think there is
Yeah.
a culture of that. And I have also kind of been aware of Gary Vaynerchuk's messaging of late. And I don't know if he has always had that or not, or because he can come across as arrogant and confident because he's a subject matter expert, right? And he tells people like it is, and he's a very straight shooter. But yeah, he does also preach this message of kindness. And I think I listened to him giving a speech recently, and he was talking about a business model of 2025 being focused, especially if you're a small local business or something. He was talking about leading with kindness and really going deep in, I'll call it customer service. That probably doesn't do it justice, but he's like, really get to know who your clients are. What do they like? Surprise them with gifts or messages or little things like that. I mean, we've been exposed to a few people who do things like that. A little audio or video message on your birthday that pops into your text message feed or something. It's like, oh my gosh, wow. I'm sure it's driven by a CRM somewhere in the back end, but not everybody's doing it. And it still took somebody effort
Right.
to record it and send that little message or something. And so yeah, I do think that's a maybe a movement that we're seeing, an anti-movement even, right? I mean, some of these contrarian things take hold, and maybe there's just enough of this 80-hour work week grind and people talking more about wellness or this, tough guy mentality where there's space for kindness. And it does gain attention, I think, because it is a bit outside the norm, which maybe gives it a little bit of highlight there. Let's kind of fast forward a little bit here and talk about these latter years. So you've gotten into veterinary medicine and being a surgeon, and then I can't remember if you said 2020 or when, but you got more into multifamily as
Yep.
your real estate niche. A spark for that? Was there a certain driver or something behind
Sure.
getting?
Two things. One was maybe a little bit of boredom. We finished renovating the house that we live in. And so, maybe boredom's not the right word, but idle hands, what they say. But we finished renovating the house that we were in. But more importantly, my son had turned a year old. And I realized, like, so my wife is from the veterinary field as well. She's a technician. And so she was used to me working a lot, being on call, potentially being gone in the middle of the night for a case, like things like that was normal to her. Her and I, that was our relationship. We knew that, like, wasn't. But then we had our first kid, and like I grew to resent that lifestyle pretty quickly. Like,
Mm,
I there was nothing that was more important to me than like being a present father. And so when they're really young, they want mom mostly. Like, that's I always felt like when the kids were super young, I was not the main interest, but like I also recognized she needs my help. And it was just like, before it was like, I gotta work, I gotta work, I gotta work. We don't go to this family thing because I have to work. We don't go, and it was like the story of my, previous, like I said, I started vet school in 2000. So like for 20 years, I had been very dedicated to that, to like any like missed a lot of family time with like my cousins, my extended family, that kind of stuff. And then I just didn't want that to continue. Being on call, for people who've ever been on call, can be like really brutal. I didn't mind it when I was younger, but it would be like, if I got called in the middle of the night, it didn't mean I didn't have to go to work the next day. So like sometimes it means being awake for 24, 36, 48 hours before you get to lay down and sleep. And like, again, as I got older, maybe that was part of the problem. But like, I also had a kid that was young enough that when he was awake, I needed to be awake. And so it was just this thing that didn't work well together. I started just thinking about how I could get more heavily into real estate. And it didn't start with a thought of syndication. I live in California, and so I read David, if people are familiar, David Green wrote a book called Out of State Investing, I believe is the title. I read that book 3 times, or maybe 3 times reading it and 4 times listening to it. Fourth time was an audiobook. Like, I was like, I can do this out of state. I had always been DIY guy. Everything I did was with my own hands. And like, reading that book was this crazy revelation to me that people were doing it in a place different than they lived. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And maybe this is my mom's side of me. If I get an idea that I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Like, it's like, what do they say? Ready, fire, aim, or whatever that is. So I'm like, I'm going to do that. So I immediately start looking for properties to buy, but I'm looking at single family. And I had a friend who had moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and became a realtor. And I was like, hey, you can help me with this. And so going through that whole process, running numbers on a bunch of single family houses. And then I heard a podcast about syndication. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm talking about, but on steroids. Like because I was like, how many houses am I going to have to buy to get where I want to? And then it was like, here's this podcast and they're like, oh, you can buy 100 units at a time or 400 units at a time or whatever. And like do this whole thing. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. So long story short, heard that podcast, went down that rabbit hole with books and podcasts, got a mentor, like again, like dove all in, pivoted from, thinking about it from a single family standpoint to out of state investing so that was kind of what 2020 looked like. And I mean, most of that happened in the first 6 months. I was like, I'm doing this. And then boom, 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 boom. And by mid 2020, I had a mentor and was working towards syndication. So it took a while to get the first one under contract, but yeah, I was like, this is great. This sounds like a great plan. I'm going to do this.
I'm very curious. I'm very curious. We got into multifamily probably exactly the same time as you did. And it's not a secret. There's been a lot of market shifts. And I'm curious to hear, how did you navigate through all of that?
It's been hard. Talk about Fight Club, right? Like it's been the first 2 years was like magic. The very first thing we invested in was as a passive investor in a syndication. I think we doubled our money in 18 months. I was like, this is amazing. And so much so that, and then I purchased 3 multifamily properties between fourth quarter of 2021 and second quarter of 2022. It was going so great. I quit my W-2 job. And then the interest rates shot up and all of it came to a screeching halt. So it was like, we had actually, I had, like I said, I tend to go all in, and I mean, we bought these deals. I invested passively in my own deals, in other people's deals. I was like, this is going to be great. Like we had decent passive cash flow coming in already, like in the short time, and it almost all went away, like in a month, basically, like almost all went away. Everybody ran into trouble. I don't think that's a secret. I hope it's not a secret, but it was. So I had to figure something out. And it was like, I had quit my W-2. I was okay with making less money by leaving my W-2, but it was too much less, like sudden. And it was like, and so I could have gone back to the W-2 life, but I was like, but I had found what I really wanted, and that was time with my family. Like I had figured out what was really important. It wasn't the dollars, it was the time freedom. And by then our daughter was born in 2021, summer of 2021, when everything was going great. And so by that time I have a family, like a real responsibility. And so the other piece of all this is that I had a mobile surgery business that we had been doing as just like truly a side hustle. Like people had reached out to me and I had my W-2 job where I went and did surgery, and people had asked like, hey, can you come do this surgery at our clinic? Like here and there. Very, very, sometimes we would do 1 case in a week. Sometimes we wouldn't do any. Sometimes we would do 3. Like it wasn't a real business per se. And so when interest rates went up, a couple things, if I'm getting too long-winded, tell me, but I feel like some of this stuff is like important for people to hear, that you can take some hits and keep going. And so we had, at the time, we also had another deal under contract, and that deal fell through because interest rates went up so high. But if people aren't familiar, it was very, very commonplace to have a non-refundable deposit, which we did. And so not only did we lose almost all of our passive income, we lost a big chunk of money just by losing a deposit on a deal that still hasn't sold, by the way. So maybe they should come back around someday. But so a lot of stuff happened. Like we had a bit of a cushion, but a lot of stuff happened, and that cushion dried up real quick. And so what we did is, the only thing I really could think to do is we ramped up our surgery business, our mobile surgery business. And so I got another mentor. I got a business coach, and we went hard at that. Like we had to continue managing the assets that we had to stay afloat there, but I went hard at growing that business. And we had set like a revenue goal. It took 3 months to get there. We're now well past that, like a year and some later, on a monthly basis. And so what I learned from that experience was I could pull levers in business and make changes that were much faster and much more substantial than I can do in at least multifamily real estate. There's still a lot of value in real estate and multifamily specifically. It's not that I don't think it's a good asset class, but you have, generally your residents have a 1-year lease. They can't do anything in that unit that's assuming everything's good, right? That's assuming they're paying their rent. Like
Yeah.
you can't change anything there. And so with the business, we were able to grow it very quickly. It's easier to market and bring on more customers, things like that. Without the important piece of that is it's easier to do that without a ton of capital infusion. Like
Mhm.
I want to go out and buy another, several $100 or several hundred unit multifamily property. Like I need millions.
Yeah. Seven figures.
It's like I can sort of sweat equity my way into building a business or spend like some money on marketing or whatever. And so I came up with the idea for what our fund structure is now, where we're actually acquiring multifamily and businesses within the same fund. And so
Okay.
that's been the focus for the last year, really. It was maybe a year and a half, is that strategy of running those two assets side by side, using multifamily real estate for some cash flow, but more looking at the tax benefits and appreciation over
Mhm.
time, and then taking a business and layering that on top of it for the cash flow. And you put those two together and you can really make for some pretty strong returns that way. So that's been how it all, I mean, it's just, again, like got to figure it out, right? I'm not going to stop. So you gotta figure it out. You got to adapt. You got to do something different if the thing you're doing right now doesn't work. And, and it like multifamily is going to be fine. So like real estate's going to be fine. It's all, but the other thing that I've learned is you need reserves. Don't invest your last dollar. Like anybody who's thinking about investing actively or passively, like don't invest your last dollar.
Mhm.
There, you need to have something in the tank to get you through when there are things that go wrong, because they will. And then you just you work and you
Yeah.
And
invest.
you made lemonades out of the lemons that life
Yeah,
served you.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, I
That's
think
it.
I saw a post of yours today about getting punched in the mouth. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and having to be flexible and adaptable. I mean, our stories are
Yes.
incredibly similar. I would say, like Lydia mentioned, we started multifamily in 2020. Spent 6 months educating, found a mentor and a program to join, and our first few deals, we were limited partner investors. Big, I mean, yes, doubled our money in 18 months each of those. We were off to the races and kind of then, we progressed into deeper into the general partnership framework where got into the lead sponsorship role in a few deals. And yeah, I mean, then I'm not sure. Yes, all of what you brought up are important lessons learned. I think debt structure is another important
Yeah,
takeaway for people
for sure.
because I'm not sure anybody could have enough reserves in the tank given the record run up of interest rates it's like living in a 100-year floodplain and having a certain insurance coverage and getting hit. Fortunately for us, we had our land business that we started in 2016, and similar to you, that is like stress-free, steady eddy cash flow. And so when we ran into multifamily issues and turbulence and deal flow essentially stopped and cash flow really wasn't coming out of these deals because all the money was going into keeping the deal solvent. And
Right.
so we were able to double down and really accelerate in our land business and grow that. And we continue to go back to that just because, to your point, it's nimble, it's flexible, it doesn't require a whole lot of cash to increase our revenue and our income. And so yeah, all these parallels kind of go into there. And we have since, licking some wounds, trying to understand lessons learned. And Lidge and I find ourselves both very timid in getting back into multifamily deals, right? We're super just being ultra careful about all these little details, so much to the point that deals just really don't pencil out if you're incredibly conservative and just trying to couch against every contingency. You almost can't make a deal work because there are other people that are taking a little more risk tolerance. And I do think the market opens up. And yes, multifamily is not going anywhere. The housing shortage is here to stay for at least 5 years, if not, a decade. Will there be ups and downs? Yes. I think we need to figure out how to weather those types of storms and or play in different spaces, whether we're looking at maybe smaller assets that we can own outright, and we can own them as long as we want to own them, versus a syndication where it has a 5 to 7 year life cycle and you're kind of flipping, in a sense, deals. But yeah, the appreciation and the tax benefits are also, are big plays there as well, because that's just so powerful in amplifying your wealth and your income when you can minimize your tax bill and
Yeah.
leverage a lot of those depreciable benefits and other things that come along with it. But yeah, it's been a tricky a tricky few years, but it feels like it starts to unlock. We'll see what 2025 holds. I mean,
Mm.
there's a lot of unknowns, dare I
Yeah.
say, craziness in the air in terms of what may or may not happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's like, to your point, like there's, we don't know what's going to happen. We really can't. And but it's an interesting thing is like, if you don't do anything at all because you're afraid, that's just as bad. Like you're going to
Yeah,
lose money by not doing anything at all.
sure.
And so it's like, you have to find a thing. And you have to, I think, no matter what, like unless you're already wealthy, you've got to have an active income and you've got to work towards passive income.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like that's it. And your active income might be being a doctor or doing land deals
Right.
or a construction business or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. You need something that's going to keep the lights on and food on the table if the rest of it goes away for a while. Like you have to be able to weather those storms. Unless again, like if you're already uber wealthy,
Okay.
then
Yeah.
yeah,
You're not
freely live on
concerned about
passive.
it.
But
Yeah.
unless
Just
you won the lottery, you did something to get to that point. And so
yeah.
like the idea is to just
Wealth
change that ratio.
preservation at that point. Yeah. It's not losing pace with inflation or the cost of living that's going up. Yeah.
100%.
Well, let's start to land this plane here a little bit. I know we're kind of going deep into the hour, and I know you have some activities, family activities that I would like you to be able to honor. So let's maybe some final thoughts. So you have your own podcast, Know Your Why, which I love the concept of. Anything, it sounds like that's continuing, and maybe the mission behind that, and then as well as kind of what you're looking forward to into 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. The podcast is definitely continuing. The idea, the concept to me is, like I said, when I got into especially commercial real estate specifically, I was listening to a lot of podcasts and,
Mhm.
and a lot of podcasts would be like, what is your why? That would be one of the things that people would ask about. And it was always, almost always the most interesting piece to
Yeah.
me. Like because all of the rest of it is the same. Like you can only talk about how to do a syndication for so long. It's so like every person's going to basically say within some parameters the same thing. The
Yeah.
process is the same. And it's like, but why are you doing that? What is your reason why it's important to you and that sort. So I have toyed with the idea of changing the name to the evolution of why, because I have realized within myself and also talking to guests that like what it was when you were, 10, 20, 50, like
Sure.
it's different. And it's like, again, I look back at like my why early on was probably just escape. It's like escaping, getting away from something I didn't want. Now it's my family and like having an impact and things like that. So that stuff changes over time. And I've heard that from other people. But that's the message behind the show. We talk about I think honestly it's very similar to your format. It's like we just have a conversation and get behind what's important to people and letting them talk about that is really what I try to do.
Nice.
2025, I hope things get better in terms of our existing assets, and I feel as though they will. I feel as though they already are. You can sort of feel some of that relief coming. There were, aside from some of the issues we talked about, there's just been a lot of stuff that has come up, and it's navigating that. And now I think we have a lot more knowledge behind it. I'm excited about, where the fund is going. We're buying a construction business, so again, going back to the beginning, sort of, I'm getting my contractor's license. I've been doing construction since I was a teenager, but never actually had the license. And now I always worked for someone else, but I need my license to be able to buy a construction business here in California. So it's,
Right.
yeah. So it's a bit of a full circle moment for me. I hope to be swinging the hammers a lot less than I did then, but still be able to. I enjoy it. I joke a lot that being a surgeon is just like being a really highly educated carpenter. I fix bones a lot. It's not that different than fixing a house. So I like working with my hands. I like taking something that's broken and fixing it. Like that's ultimately, that appeals to me in many different, I guess, avenues.
Right.
Yeah. Likewise.
For the fund, do you accept investments? And if yes, what is the minimum?
Yes, we accept investments. The minimum is 50,000. It is accredited investors only. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk about it here. But yeah, if people want to look at our website, everything's there. They can reach out to me directly, but our website's larkcapital.com. Literally a whole page to the fund. But I mean, honestly, I enjoy talking to people about investing, especially people that are maybe new to the space, because I think it's super valuable and they should know about it. They should know about alternative investments. I don't like the term alternative investments because everybody needs a place to live. So if you're investing in real estate, that's probably
Pretty
not
mainstream.
really somebody, even land, like, so even if you don't have a home, you live on land. Like it's all real estate is very varied. So it's fun to talk about this stuff and let people know what's available to them and just hopefully help people, improve their financial futures.
Well, we'll get a link to your Lark Capital in the show notes, as well as your LinkedIn profile. It seems like you're mostly active there as a primary channel. And yeah, we like to end each of these episodes with gratitude. So we're certainly thankful that you came on and shared your expertise and your story and a little bit about your why. But any one or ones in particular that kind of been instrumental along your path that you'd like to give a special thank you to?
Yeah, sure. And thank you to both of you for having me on. I guess maybe I'll stick on theme and thank my mom. Thank my mom for teaching me to be a good person. Like ultimately, I feel like that has gotten me pretty far. I'm happy that she instilled that in me, and so have had a lot of great mentors, but she was the first.
Yep. First love, those moms. So I'm excited to go see my mom here in a few weeks. It's been Thanksgiving and
Nice. Enjoy.
things. So, well, thank you again for coming on the show. We wish you all the best. Stay in touch. I encourage anybody to reach out. I think it's a great fund concept, having the appreciable benefits and the wealth generating benefits of multifamily packaged together with businesses. So I think that's a really great concept. I don't know that I've really heard of that explicitly structured in such a way, but yeah, encourage any listener to get out there and check that out, and wish you a happy holidays and all the best in 2025, man.
Yeah. Same to both of you. Thank you so much again for having me on.
You're so
Thank
welcome.
you.
For those of you joining us today, we hope you enjoyed this time in the Champions Corner as much as we did. Got some awesome takeaways, and most importantly, will take action to continue living your best life and maximizing your potential. Mindset is such an important aspect of life, and when coupled with action, delivers undeniably powerful results.
Please subscribe to the podcast to hear from more great guests and get the latest mindset mastery insights and cash flow matchups.
Again, thank you so much for investing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cashflow Fight Club Podcast.